There's an uncomfortable truth about human psychology that many people would rather not face. When someone betrays a deeply empathic person, someone with real integrity, emotional depth, and sincere goodwill, they don't just move on like nothing happened. Something fractures, and at first it happens inside, where identity, meaning, and self-deception collide. When a narcissist betrays a super empath, the fallout isn't mainly the kind of sadness people imagine. It's more like a structural collapse. The narcissist's inner world becomes unstable in a way that shakes the foundation of how they function. A super empath isn't only giving love or support. Without realizing it, they act like a stabilizer. They help regulate emotional chaos, offer steady reflection, and become an external anchor that keeps the narcissist feeling coherent and held together. Welcome to Healing Mind. Today we're talking about why narcissistic betrayal hits so deep, how it affects the empath and the narcissist differently, and how true healing begins when you stop carrying what was never yours. If you find this helpful, please like the video and subscribe to Healing Mind for more calm, clear relationship insights. For a narcissist, the sense of self is often fragile and fragmented, even if it looks confident from the outside. They lean on the empath's presence to feel stable, but they rarely admit that to themselves. What appears like strength is often borrowed structure. What looks like superiority is frequently dependence dressed up as dominance. The super empath tends to absorb volatility, make sense of unspoken tension, and turn conflict into understanding, especially the conflict the narcissist can't tolerate within themselves. Over time, the narcissist becomes reliant on this dynamic without consciously naming it. They feel more powerful, more certain, more alive around the empath, but instead of recognizing that this steadiness is coming from another human being, they misread it as evidence of their own greatness. That misunderstanding becomes the beginning of betrayal because it convinces them the empath is optional rather than essential. When betrayal happens, the narcissist often believes they're taking back control. They think that discarding, deceiving, or devaluing the empath will strengthen their dominance and prove they don't need anyone. But the truth is they're cutting off the very system that helped manage their inner disorder. The empath's presence functioned like a psychological mirror, one that softened shame and helped organize feelings that would otherwise feel overwhelming. Once that mirror is gone, the narcissist is left alone with impulses, contradictions, and self-loathing they don't know how to integrate. So the loss isn't only relational, it becomes existential. It affects their sense of identity at a deep level, because the empath wasn't just a partner, they were part of the structure that kept the narcissist from collapsing under their own internal chaos. Identity regulation is basically the ability to maintain a steady sense of who you are over time. Healthy people develop this capacity through growth, feedback, emotional learning, and the ability to tolerate guilt and discomfort. Narcissists often don't complete that developmental process. Instead of regulating from the inside, they rely on the outside. They need other people to affirm their value, numb their shame, and reflect an ideal image back to them. A super empath is unusually powerful in this role because of their consistency, depth, and ability to hold complexity without instantly reacting with harsh retaliation. That steady presence allows the narcissist to function at a higher level than they normally could. So when the empath finally withdraws, the internal scaffolding collapses, even if the narcissist refuses to admit it out loud. On the surface, the narcissist may look completely fine. They might replace the empath quickly, chase attention, or jump into new connections to prove they're unaffected. But those replacements usually don't have the depth needed to stabilize identity. New supply can inflate the ego for a moment, but it doesn't actually hold the person together. Without the empath's grounding influence, the narcissist often becomes more reactive and more fragmented. Mood swings grow sharper, relationships become thinner and more transactional, rage and emptiness start cycling faster, the chaos that used to be buffered now spills into awareness, and the narcissist feels it as irritation, restlessness, and a constant need to escape their own inner experience. They may not call it collapse, but the pattern often shows up as instability that gets worse with time, not better. What blocks real recovery is that the narcissist refuses to name what was actually lost. Healing requires facing guilt, integrating shame, and accepting responsibility. But for a narcissist, doing that would threaten the false self they depend on to survive emotionally. Admitting the empath regulated them would mean admitting dependency, vulnerability, and moral failure. And that realization feels like annihilation to the identity they've constructed. So they avoid it at all costs. Instead of grieving, they blame. Instead of reflecting, they rewrite the story. Instead of learning, they repeat the same pattern with someone new. The cycle continues because the truth is too costly for them to face. And the more they repeat it, the more hollow their connections become, which only increases the instability they're trying to outrun. Meanwhile, the super empath goes through a very different transformation. The betrayal hurts deeply, but it doesn't usually destroy them the way it destabilizes the narcissist. Instead, it becomes a turning point. The empath begins redirecting emotional energy back toward themselves. They build boundaries, reclaim parts of their identity that were invested in someone else, and start choosing clarity over confusion. Their pain becomes a source of meaning rather than a permanent wound. What used to be poured outward becomes internal strength. Over time, the empath develops the kind of self-regulation they were previously offering externally. They become more grounded, more integrated, and more self-directed. And that growth, ironically, can intensify the narcissist's decline, because now the empath is stable without them while they continue unraveling despite new attachments. This contrast is hard for the narcissist to tolerate. They can keep chasing new mirrors, new admiration, and new validation, but it rarely creates real stability. True recovery would require admitting their sense of self wasn't fully self-generated. It would require mourning the empath not as a replaceable object, but as a stabilizing presence they used and ultimately destroyed. And without that honest reckoning, they stay trapped, copying, performing, chasing reflections of wholeness they can't sustain. The betrayal becomes the moment the illusion of independence is exposed. From that point forward, the inner deficit becomes harder and harder to ignore, even if they spend their life trying to distract themselves from it. The narcissist's biggest mistake is believing that power comes from controlling other people instead of from creating order inside themselves. That confusion sits at the center of how they operate, and it becomes painfully obvious when they get close to a super empath. Control feels thrilling to them because it gives a rush of superiority. If they can dominate someone, twist their emotions, or keep them off balance, it seems like proof that they're strong. But that strength is an illusion. Real power is the ability to regulate yourself, sit with discomfort, and stay grounded under pressure. The narcissist doesn't have that skill, so they try to manage the world around them instead. With a super empath, it even looks like it works at first, because the empath's patience and depth create space for the narcissist's behavior to go unchecked longer than it should. A super empath often responds to control in a way the narcissist doesn't understand. Instead of immediately fighting back, the empath may try to make sense of what's happening. They might respond with compassion, curiosity, or self-reflection. The narcissist reads that as weakness when it's actually restraint and moral responsibility. But narcissists don't recognize strength in quiet forms. To them, strength equals dominance, so they increase the pressure. They push boundaries harder, test limits more aggressively, and escalate controlling behavior because they think they're winning. And here's the trap. The more they control, the more dependent they become on the very dynamic they believe proves their power. They start building their sense of identity around provoking reactions, extracting reassurance, and destabilizing the empath emotionally. Every time manipulation works, it reinforces the fantasy of mastery, even though their inner world is becoming more brittle. Underneath the surface, nothing is improving for them. They aren't developing inner strength. They're outsourcing stability. The empath becomes a pressure valve for the narcissist's unresolved insecurity, shame, and anger. The more the narcissist relies on control, the less capable they become of functioning without it. That's why the betrayal becomes the moment where the miscalculation turns irreversible. In their mind, betraying or discarding the empath is supposed to be the ultimate proof of dominance. They expect to feel free, superior, and untouchable. Instead, they set off self-destruction. When they remove the empath, they also remove the system that was absorbing emotional overflow and reflecting coherence back to them. What they called control was really a fragile setup that kept chaos contained. Once it's broken, the narcissist comes face to face with their disorder with no buffer. This collapse isn't always immediate or obvious, which is why it's so confusing from the outside. The narcissist may act like they've won. They might show off a new relationship, perform exaggerated confidence, or intensify their grand image, but those are compensation strategies, not evidence of stability. Internally, losing control over the empath often turns into losing control over themselves. Anxiety rises, irritability sharpens, they become more impulsive, more suspicious, and more reactive to small slights. Their urge to dominate grows because they have no other way to manage what they feel inside. The reason recovery is so difficult is that healing would require them to change their definition of power. They would need to admit that controlling someone else was a substitute for self-regulation, and that betrayal wasn't strength, it was exposure. That truth is unbearable for them because it shatters the grand self-image they depend on to survive. Without that image, they'd have to face the shame, fear, and dependency they've buried for years. So instead of facing it, they double down. They look for new targets, new relationships, new environments where they can reestablish dominance, but each cycle brings weaker results. New sources of attention are often less patient, less emotionally regulating, and less willing to absorb the same chaos. Conflicts intensify faster, discards happen more often. The narcissist's world starts shrinking because people resist, withdraw, or stop tolerating the behavior. What began as an attempt to prove power ends in instability and isolation. Meanwhile, the super empath goes through a different shift. Away from the controlling dynamic, they feel grief, but they also feel relief. Their nervous system begins to reset. They regain agency through clarity and boundaries, not through domination. That quiet strength becomes a mirror the narcissist can't stand looking at. Watching the empath become more grounded and less reactive exposes the original error even more. Control was never power. It was a coping strategy hiding internal weakness. By confusing dominance with strength, the narcissist starts a process that slowly erodes the foundation of their own functioning. Betrayal doesn't free them. It removes the last structure that kept their inner chaos contained, trapping them in patterns they don't have the emotional tools to manage anymore. Deep down, unprocessed shame sits at the center of narcissistic psychology, like a fault line that never settles. Shame doesn't say, "I did something wrong." It says, "Something is wrong with me." And that feeling is so threatening that the narcissist spends their life running from it through grandiosity, entitlement, and blame. The super empath plays a major role in keeping that shame from fully surfacing, not by eliminating it, but by absorbing its emotional fallout and turning it into something the narcissist can survive. Through empathy, forgiveness, and emotional labor, the empath unknowingly cushions moments that would otherwise expose moral failure or emotional inadequacy. When the narcissist lashes out, withdraws, or breaks trust in smaller ways, the empath often tries to understand instead of retaliating. That response prevents shame from hitting full force. Over time, the narcissist learns, often unconsciously, that even their worst impulses won't immediately lead to abandonment. It creates a false sense of safety that keeps the system from collapsing. Eventually, the narcissist starts relying on that buffering effect. Shame stops functioning as a signal for self-reflection and gets managed through the empath's reactions instead. If discomfort shows up, it gets projected outward and the cycle continues. When guilt starts creeping toward awareness, the narcissist pushes it away. They redirect it, deny it, or shove it onto someone else. The empath ends up becoming the emotional storage space for what the narcissist refuses to carry. This isn't usually something the narcissist sits down and plans, but over time it becomes a system they depend on. Their inner balance is built around having someone who can absorb what they can't handle, so when betrayal happens and the empath steps back, the whole setup collapses. The withdrawal isn't just losing affection or attention, it's losing the one mechanism that kept shame from swallowing them. Without the empath's steady presence, shame returns in its rawest form. There's no longer anyone to absorb projections or to soften the story in a way that protects the narcissist from seeing themselves clearly. That's where the real breakdown begins. Shame floods their mind with no filter, and it shows up as rage, emptiness, paranoia, and deep insecurity. They may not label it as shame, but their behavior reveals it. They start tearing other people down, making impulsive moves, or loudly promoting themselves as a defense against feeling exposed on the inside. The false self, this carefully built image, starts straining under pressure. It becomes more rigid, more demanding, more desperate, because it's trying to hold everything together while the core underneath is cracking. And because shame threatens identity itself, the narcissist can't process it in a healthy way. Processing it would require admitting what they did, accepting responsibility, and staying present with the pain long enough for real growth to happen. That demands humility and emotional stamina, and those are skills the narcissist never fully developed. So instead of working through shame, they run from it. They chase new relationships, new stories, and new environments where they can rebuild the illusion of superiority quickly. But without the empath, that illusion becomes unstable. New sources of validation may offer attention, admiration, and excitement, but they usually don't provide the deep emotional steadiness that actually contains shame over time. Admiration isn't the same as regulation. Because of that, the narcissist begins cycling faster between idealizing and devaluing people. Every disappointment triggers shame again, and every trigger forces them to use stronger defenses. Their inner world gets more chaotic, swinging between grandiosity and worthlessness, confidence and collapse, obsession and emptiness, because nothing is truly being healed. The empath, on the other hand, moves in a completely different direction. Withdrawal hurts, but it also returns emotional responsibility to where it belongs. The empath stops carrying another person's inner mess. As boundaries become solid, the empath processes grief and anger instead of escaping it, and that creates integration rather than fragmentation. Their identity strengthens, emotional resilience grows. Their nervous system starts calming down, and self-trust slowly returns. And this contrast can deepen the narcissist's collapse. Watching the empath become more stable highlights the narcissist's stagnation, which triggers even more shame. But instead of inspiring honest reflection, it often produces envy and resentment. The narcissist may try to smear the empath, minimize them, or rewrite the story to protect the false self. Those strategies might give short-term relief, but they never solve the real problem underneath. Unprocessed shame doesn't vanish, it piles up. Every betrayal adds weight to the inner burden. Every discarded relationship leaves behind residue that must be defended against. Over time, the cost becomes too heavy to carry. The narcissist can swing between emotional numbness and sudden explosions, feeling disconnected from meaning but terrified of looking inward. And collapse doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like repetition, stubbornness, and emotional deadness, living the same cycle again and again while pretending nothing is wrong. The empath's withdrawal marks the moment shame can't be outsourced anymore. Without a container to hold it, the narcissist faces pressure they don't have the tools to manage. What follows isn't healing, it's fragmentation, as the psyche exhausts itself trying to escape an emotion that keeps demanding to be faced. And the narcissist's stability depends on more than attention or admiration. It also depends on having a moral witness, someone who silently validates their version of reality by staying, tolerating, and believing. The super empath often fills this role without even meaning to. Through consistency, fairness, and emotional attunement, the empath becomes the steady observer who helps the narcissist feel not fundamentally bad, even when conflict or harm happens. The empath's willingness to understand and give context reduces the narcissist's fear of being truly seen. As long as that witness remains, the narcissist can keep telling themselves their actions were justified, misunderstood, or harmless. A moral witness doesn't openly excuse behavior, but their presence delays consequences, and that delay becomes a form of protection the narcissist quietly relies on. The empath's loyalty and patience soften the impact of what the narcissist does. Harm doesn't lead to immediate abandonment. Betrayal doesn't lead to instant exposure. That gap between behavior and consequence lets the narcissist keep operating without confronting the ethical weight of their choices. In that way, the empath becomes a buffer, not by intention, but through values like compassion and hope. The narcissist needs that buffer more than they realize because it helps them keep internal coherence, even while behaving in ways that contradict basic moral standards. The empath's ability to hold both the good and the bad allows the narcissist to keep believing they're still a good person underneath. And that belief is essential for the false self to survive.